Thank you so much for participating in our podcast, Dr. Musanti. We hope that through our conversation, our audience will not only get to know more of your research, but will also gain insights into some of today's critical research directions that they themselves may want to pursue in their own research or teaching endeavors. So my first question is, it would be really awesome if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. Could you also tell us your trajectory in becoming multilingual education researcher?
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm presently a professor and also interim chair in the Bilingual and Literacy Studies Department at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I've been here in this university since 2011. I came to the United States around, well, many years ago, doesn't matter when. Just, to do a master's degree, and then I stayed to complete my doctorate in education. I pursued a fellowship, a postdoc with this project, CEMELA, the Center of Mathematics Education for Latinos. But before that, for many years, I worked in Argentina in teacher education. I was a teacher educator there, and I worked preparing teachers, and also at the national level, I was involved with the Department of Education, or the equivalent to the Department of Education there, to develop national policies for teachers' professional development, working with interdisciplinary groups across disciplines, and engaging in identifying ways that we could promote innovative practices. So then I landed in the United States, and I became involved in, deepening my understanding of how to prepare teachers that are, highly qualified, but also that understand how to address issues of equity, how to engage in teaching students from diverse backgrounds, teachers that work with students from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds. And so that's where my research and my interest in what I do today started. So, and then when I came here to the Rio Grande Valley, this is a bilingual, very bilingual, bicultural, transnational community. So that's when I sort of started to see the power of a more dynamic and holistic view of bilingualism. What is translanguage in pedagogies?
I'm actually really interested in what you just said, because I know that many of your recent publications in the past several years involved teacher education, teacher preparation, and especially when you discussed how you work with the teachers, who work with students from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. I'm really curious in terms of what are some of the most critical issues that you're really concerned about? And then maybe what are some of the findings that you see that would really inspire us in terms of what to do with the teacher education in the future?
So I think I'm really interested in understanding how teachers and teacher candidates grapple with issues of language and culture while teaching and while planning instruction, while thinking what is best for their students in the daily work they do. And I think it's very important that as teacher educators, we think about how to teach and how to prepare our teacher candidates. So, and since my arrival to the RGV, so I became puzzled with, the richness and the fluidity of my students' linguistic repertoire. And as a result, I engaged in a systematic inquiry, sort of a systematic self-study to further my understanding of how teacher candidates use their Spanish and English repertoire. They integrate, and how they value their bilingualism in teaching, and doing so in a context of very contradictory teaching discourses that sometimes, for instance, in the region where I live, in the district where, in the school district where the university or my campus is situated, there are no bilingual dual language programs. So this constant discourse and push towards, an English only education, even in the context of a bilingual transnational community like ours. So our role is very important in trying to prepare our teacher candidates to really embrace bilingualism, see their bilingualism as really an asset and their own power and a power, no? Just to empower them also to design instructions for their students that really validate who they are in terms of their linguistic diversity and also their cultural backgrounds, no? So that's the reason I started to investigate my teaching practice and centered on how to leverage teacher candidates' bilingualism and the impact of fostering while leveraging their bilingualism while still fostering the development of their academic Spanish or their pedagogical Spanish that they need to really teach in bilingual classrooms. So that's the reason I draw, from the work of Ofelia Garcia and Wei and other authors to really comprehend and integrate a pedagogical approach that is centered on translanguaging in my own teaching practice as well as on my research. So that's probably the core of my work, and especially because in relation to the issues in bilingual teacher preparation, I feel that there is still a lot to be done to really address issues of equity and issues of how to counteract the hegemonic presence of English, and also how to counteract and how to tool teacher candidates to really be advocates for their students and their students' linguistic diversity, that they can really helps them to really amplify through their teaching the students' opportunities to develop their biliteracy skills, embrace themselves as bilingual learners. And, especially I focus on my research and in my practices in trying to help teacher candidates to understand how to think teaching as in a way that renders students as capable learners, instead of, to counteract this other issue, which is the persistent deficit view that exists about emergent bilinguals. So that still is, very pervasive in schools and in the way emergent bilinguals are framed as learners.
One thing that I'm really curious is I also taught a course called Teaching English to students from culturally and linguistically bilingual backgrounds. So I'm just always very curious. It's been such a long-standing perspective that, as you just said, a lot of people perceive those English language learners, emergent English learners, as from a deficit point of view. But research have time and time again discussed how it's so beneficial for the students and the teachers to draw from their own personal cultural linguistic resources, because those are the fountains of knowledge that are really valuable to them. So, how could research bridge this gap to really help transform that long-standing perspective?
Mm-hmm. I know I think that was one of the goals of that article that we published in the journal, and the title of the article is Promising Practices. So that article, highlights and tries to amplify, the impact of this teacher, Elba. No, she was a kindergarten teacher teaching, who engaged her students in mathematics thinking by presenting to them authentic mathematics stories that were anchored in a student's cultural knowledge. So, and also she integrated multimodal representation for problem solving and allowed them to really think collectively about mathematical problems. And students were able to really solve really quite complex mathematical problems without still having, learned the mathematical skills, maybe the calculations and the algorithms, but they could think mathematically. And so in doing so, she was positioning students as really capable learners. And also she was doing that in Spanish. She was teaching in Spanish. She was presenting the stories in Spanish. She was, capturing ideas and experiences that the students had to create those stories. And at points also, students were also able to create their own mathematical stories. And that was very powerful. And I think that's the type of research that sort of shows how a teacher who really is focused on seeing what their students are capable of instead of what their students do not know, and also using language as a resource and as a way to allow the students to access content knowledge. So, and in doing so, she was also amplifying and expanding a students' linguistic repertoire by using mathematical language. So I think that article was really a good example of that type of research. But I think sometimes what happens is this research goes unnoticed by teachers, by practitioners, and that is probably our duty too, to start thinking how we reach out, to continue thinking, because there are many people that do that, and I've tried that too, to bridge that knowledge that we gather and develop in academia with the everyday experience of our teachers, to make it more accessible, more available. And so, and I think that is really important, no? Because sometimes when we publish in a journal, that's read by academics and not by teachers. And so we need to find ways in which, through which teachers and also administrators access this type of research. There is a lot that has been done and is constantly done, but we need to continue and working in that direction.
Piggyback on what you said about your manuscript with Jamer, it says that it was supported by the National Science Foundation. I think people would be really curious about to just learn a little bit about that project.
Right. This investigation was part of a longitudinal study that we did for like 4 years. And this was funded by this Center of the Mathematical Education of Latinos, CEMELA, which was an interdisciplinary multi-university site consortium that focused on the research and practice of the teaching and learning of mathematics Latino students in the United States. And that was funded by NSF. So that was really part of an incredible collaboration among researchers across institutions. And in that work, I worked for 4 years with Dr. Silvia Ceredon-Patikis and Mary Marshall and others. We work with this school and with these K through 4th grade bilingual teachers and kind of 140 students, video recording mathematical lessons, interviewing teachers, reviewing students' work, and collaborating with school in different ways, like developing different type of trainings or professional development, and work with parents. So it was like a situated approach to teacher professional development, and also a longitudinal research on the impact of the work we were doing with these K through 4 teachers in relation to work with Latino students in teaching and learning mathematics. And that was funded by the National Science Foundation. So yeah, that was a great, amazing opportunity.
I'm also very curious. We talked about some of the issues in teacher preparation. So what do you see as the future direction for teacher preparation research in the next decade?
We need to continue to deepen the research in the field of multilingual teacher preparation, deepening, especially deepening the understanding of what it means to, for instance, from what I do, I think it is important to continue the research in both bilingual pre-service and in-service teachers regarding linguistic inclusive pedagogies. I think there is a lot of research that has been done in relation to translanguaging pedagogies in teacher preparation and linguistic inclusive pedagogies in teacher preparation. But still we need more, especially we need more in relation to the impact on students. So, and that requires long-term research, longitudinal studies that also look at students' learning and learning data. It would be important to that type of research gathers federal funding, and I think there are opportunities, but still there is more than needs to be done, in my perspective.
When I think of teacher preparation, I also think of it from the higher education perspective. Like these teachers are coming to different graduate programs and they're looking to gain these skills. Do you think that current graduate programs prepare them for the skills that you're talking about?
If I speak about our program, our teacher preparation program is an undergraduate teacher preparation program. It's not a graduate program. I think we've done a lot in terms of bridging theory and practice. We are working closer with schools. We are creating and developing residency programs that allows our teachers to work in the schools, for a year, and in the process of doing so, work on understanding and connecting these theories or this knowledge they are gathering in their courses with the practice they are seeing. And I think we are being more effective by doing that. I also think that still there are many challenges. For instance, the challenges imposed by high-stake standardized testing and teacher certification requirements. For instance, here in Texas, bilingual teachers need to pass 5 certification tests to become certified teachers. So that's really a huge challenge in terms of, teacher preparation, because really, and it's contributing to what is a national trend now, that there are more and more uncertified teachers in the classrooms. So especially here in Texas, now the percentage of uncertified teachers has increased or duplicated in the recent years.
My final 2 questions. One of them is, would you be able to share with us some of your current research projects that are ongoing?
Presently, I'm working with 2 colleagues in what we call a 4 trans framework to teacher education. We are exploring the intersections of transnationalism, transculturalism, languaging, and transdisciplinarity. So we believe that it is important that we start considering how these 4 areas, 4 dimensions of teacher education intersect and dialogue with each other. We've read research that highlights translanguaging, or research that highlights transnationalism, or research that highlights transculturalism, or less research on transdisciplinarity in teacher education. But we believe that there could be a powerful thing to try to start looking at teacher preparation, especially in the present context, from a 4 trans lens. That means looking at the implication of the transcultural components of teacher education vis-a-vis transnationalism, especially in our region, which we are in the border area of the United States and Mexico. And also at the same time, without losing perspective of how teachers engage in this dynamic construction of their bilingualism and the implications of a translanguaging framework to understand linguistic assets and linguistic repertoire. From that perspective is that we believe that also we need a transdisciplinary lens, that meaning, how different disciplines can help strengthen and understand better teacher education.
May I just ask a clarifying question for the purpose of the podcast? Because I think a lot of our audience would know what multi-language is, multilingual, right? They would know what's multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary. But the term that you use is translanguaging, transculturalism, transnationalism, and transdisciplinary. Would you be able to just briefly introduce these terms to our audience so that they know what they are and how the definitions differ from what they traditionally perceive them to be.
So I think when we talk about trans, we talk about this the heterogeneity and the fluidity of different backgrounds and different experiences, different languages, different cultures coming together. Multiculturalism is an important term, but however, doesn't highlight the fluidity and the interweaving of cultures or languages, experiences. And transnationalism highlights that, no, that is not just one or the other, is the integration and that's the reason I think interweaving is a good word, because it shows this interconnection. I think an important idea in relation to this for trans and what translanguaging and transculturalism and transnationalism and transdisciplinary is that interconnection, interweaving of different perspectives, different areas of knowledge for interdisciplinarity, different experiences for transnationalism. Translanguaging talks about that bilingual individuals operate with one unified system or linguistic repertoire. And so, in some cases it's Spanish English, in some other cases could be, English and another language or different languages, but they operate with that in an integrated way. So once it's, unified linguistic repertoire, and when you develop that repertoire, you are integrating elements of the different languages, and in that way, making it more complex and amplifying it. And the same with, we can apply similar idea to finding what is transculturalism and translanguage and transnationalism. No, it's that interconnection that creates a unique way of being in this, that is more fluid, more complex. Persons that live and those communities that live in spaces that integrate different nationalities, different cultures, different languages, different traditions and histories.
That's a really great explanation. So my final question is, I read your whole list of publications, and you published so much over the past, I would say, more than a decade. What word of wisdom would you have for someone who wished to publish, whether that person is a researcher or just, a teacher in the classroom?
The main thing is to find something you really want to know more about, and try to find the time to really sit down and start writing some ideas. That's what I even sometimes tell my colleagues, the ones that are coming into the profession. So finding that time and protecting that time for you to think about and to really either dedicate it to read the literature around the topic you're interested on, or to really work with your ideas around a research project. But beyond that, I would say engaging in collaboration. I think for me, collaboration was probably the most critical asset. Working with others, thinking together, trying to engage in projects that would involve more than myself. Even teachers, working with teachers or working with colleagues that were interested in similar things. That is what for me was the biggest learning point, and what moved me forward in my publications, sort of, in publishing and researching, and also taught me a lot of things. I think when we think about teaching and learning and teacher preparation or anything related to education, I think collaboration and working interdisciplinary is very important. It's critical because education is an interdisciplinary field. So there are many different disciplines that contribute to understand the education, and the same with bilingual education. So I think that would be my advice. Try to work instead of working in isolation. And if you think about, traditionally, teaching has been conceived as an isolated task. But when we start to reconceptualize teaching as a collaborative endeavor and as a collegial one, then you discover the power of constructing knowledge in interaction with others. That is the key, and everyone can do it in different ways. But if I would have an advice, probably that would be the main one.
So the way that you said protect the time really like resonates with me. And you know, I can really tell that you're doing this not just because you're doing this, that you're doing this really because it's your passion,
Mhm.
so that you could do this continuously. How do you keep that passion?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes some moments that is not so easy, but I think it's because I really do believe in the power of education. I do believe that we need to have a strong commitment to public education, especially, and to prepare teachers that want to advocate for the students, no, so, and to become the voice for their students, because I'm, you know, to make them visible, especially minoritized students, students with from linguistic diverse backgrounds, from culturally diverse backgrounds. I think that is very critical. For me, has been finding the joy in sometimes in the small things, no, like small accomplishments, maybe making a change in the program you're part of, trying some innovation in your coursework, and finding that is something that really works, and then maybe trying to research about it, and writing about that has been my approach in lately in the, I would say, in the last 7 years. That has been my approach, trying to think about what I do, to reflect on what I do, to research what I do, and to try to publish about that.